Alien woman had her legs shattered in a crash and was left to, until a human medic came to her aid. The alien ship fell through the dark sky of the moon. It burned and shook as it crashed, scattering sparks and smoke across the rocky surface. The sound of metal twisting and breaking echoed in the silent vacuum beyond. Inside the ship, alarms rang and lights flickered, casting strange colors across the alien crew. They were small, lithe beings, with pale blue skin and long fingers. They had never felt fear like this before, even in dangerous missions. Yet now, fear gripped them. Mara, a young alien woman, tried to move quickly through the twisting corridors. She carried equipment for the survey mission, sensors and recording tools that could map the moon's hidden caves. The floor shook again and she stumbled. A loud crack echoed and pain shot through her legs. She looked down and gasped. Her legs were broken badly. She could not stand. She tried to call for help, but the alarms were too loud and the communication systems were damaged. The other crew members ran past her, shouting in their language. Some fell into the shadows and were injured themselves. The ship's escape pods opened, and most of the crew managed to leave. Mara tried to drag herself, but the pain was unbearable. She pressed against the cold metal wall and cried silently. She had trained for harsh conditions, but never for this. She could hear the weak sounds of others leaving, the clanking of machinery breaking apart, and then silence. Outside, the moon's surface was gray and empty. Jagged rocks reflected the faint light from a distant star. The wind, though thin, blew fine dust across the plains. Mara's pod had been thrown far from the rest of the wreck. She could not move. She could only wait, her body trembling from shock and cold. Days passed. She tried to keep her mind alert. She remembered her home world, the gentle light of the twin suns and the laughter of her friends. Tears came, but she wiped them away. She needed to survive. She had to survive. On the fourth day, strange lights appeared on the horizon. Small, bright, moving points in the distance. Mara could not recognize them at first. Her species did not often meet humans in person. The lights grew closer, moving like slow fireflies across the gray moon. A human salvage team had arrived. They were a small crew, sent to check on abandoned mining equipment and to scout for valuable metals. They had no idea of the alien crash. Jack Miller, the human medic, noticed a flicker in the sensors. His device picked up a faint life sign. The rest of the team ignored it. Jack had always trusted his instincts. He told them to wait and followed the signal, careful as he moved across the jagged rocks. The wind bit through his suit and his gloves were stiff. The life signal was weak, almost gone. He crouched near the edge of a deep crater and scanned the area. There she was. Mara lay against a large rock, her legs twisted unnaturally. Her blue skin was pale, almost glowing faintly in the weak light. She tried to move her arms, but even that caused pain. Jack carefully opened his equipment bag. He pulled out portable medical tools, lights, and blankets. He knelt near her and spoke softly. He did not know her language, but he tried words anyway, in a calm voice. He touched her arm gently to show he meant no harm. Mara looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. She had never seen a human up close. They were larger than her and their movements were strange. Yet she felt something she did not expect. There was no threat in his eyes, only concern. She tried to speak, but no words came. Jack smiled faintly, using gestures. He pointed to his hands, then to her legs, showing he wanted to help. Mara hesitated, then slowly nodded. She could not move much, but she trusted the calm presence of this human. Jack worked slowly. He had to stabilize her legs before moving her. He used strips of metal and cloth from his bag, carefully wrapping them around her twisted limbs. Every movement caused her pain, but Jack adjusted slowly, listening to the sound she made. He spoke softly, telling her to be patient, even though she did not understand the words. She felt comfort in his voice, even without meaning. Time passed slowly. The sun moved across the sky, casting pale light on the rocks. Jack covered her with a thermal blanket to keep her warm. He offered water from a small container and she drank carefully. Her body shivered from shock and cold. Jack checked her breathing and pulse, ensuring she stayed alive. The rest of his team remained at the edge of the crater, unsure what to do. They watched him, surprised at his determination. He refused to leave her, no matter how risky it was. As night fell, the moon became even colder. Jack used a small heater to warm her. He kept talking softly, telling stories about his home world, about humans, about survival. Mara did not understand words, but she felt the tone, the intention. She felt hope, something she had almost forgotten. She realized that even in the coldest, most dangerous places, kindness could reach across worlds. Over the next day, Jack continued his work. He cleaned her injuries, wrapped her legs more firmly, and even managed to make a small splint. Mara began to respond to him. Small movements, tiny nods, gestures of understanding. She tried to help, showing him where pain was worst. The connection between them grew, even without a shared language. Jack felt it too. He knew she was starting to trust him. He did not give up, even when he grew tired and hungry. Jack and Mara faced many challenges. Loose rocks, harsh winds, and the risk of collapse in the crash area were constant, yet each time they adapted. Jack learned her small signals, her facial expressions, and what made her wince. Mara learned to read his hands, to follow his directions without fear. Together, they survived where logic said they should fail. The human traits of patience, endurance, and compassion became their tools as much as bandages and metal braces. By the third day after the crash, Mara had begun to speak very simple sounds, mimicking the tones she heard from Jack. She tried to say words that might mean help or friend, and Jack responded with nods and gentle smiles. They built a fragile trust, a bridge across species. Jack realized that his training, while designed for humans, could stretch beyond its limits if combined with careful observation and patience. He felt proud not for himself, but for their small victory, survival. The moon around them was quiet, filled with shadows and pale light. Distant stars twinkled, ignoring the struggles below. Yet in that small crater, life persisted. An alien woman and a human medic had found each other, and in that connection there was hope. No technology, no weapons, could have done what patience, kindness, and determination achieved here. They had created trust where none existed. They had given life a chance when it seemed impossible. Jack checked his tools again, made a small fire-safe light to warm Mara, and sat close to her. She rested her head lightly on his shoulder, a gesture of trust she could not explain. Jack smiled faintly, tired but satisfied. The journey was just beginning. The crash had left her broken, but his presence gave her strength. The human desire to help, to reach out, had created a bond that would grow stronger. As the night deepened, Jack watched the stars. He thought of home, of family, and of simple choices. He could have left her. He could have said it was too risky. Yet he had not. He had chosen to stay, and in staying he discovered something bigger than any mission or task, the meaning of helping another, even across worlds. Mara, too, felt something new. Fear and pain were still present, but hope had returned. She knew she would survive because someone had refused to give up on her. She did not yet understand humans fully, but she understood what kindness felt like. The alien crash had ended her independence, yet it began a new story, one where connection and trust could heal what broken bones and isolation could not. The first part of their story ended with quiet. The moon's surface was cold, the stars far, and the wind soft. Yet in the crater life stirred. Jack and Mara rested, side by side, each learning from the other, each surviving because neither had turned away. The silence was not empty. It was filled with hope, patience, and the quiet courage that defined humanity at its best. The morning light came slowly over the gray rocks of the moon. Jack woke first, careful not to disturb Mara. She slept lightly, her breathing shallow but steady. He looked at her legs, still wrapped in the makeshift splints he had made. The bones were broken badly, but his careful work had kept them from moving too much. He knew they would need proper medical attention soon, but for now, survival was the priority. Jack prepared a small breakfast from the supplies his team had brought. He had protein bars, water, and a few simple medical gels. He offered some water to Mara. She took it carefully, her hands trembling. Jack smiled, encouraging her to drink more. Every small action counted. He had learned that survival was not only about fixing injuries, but also about keeping hope alive. Mara looked at him, trying to understand. Words were still difficult, but her eyes showed curiosity and a growing trust. The human team stayed at a distance, repairing their small rover and gathering information about the moon. They were wary of the crash site. Jack did not blame them. Alien biology was strange, and helping Mara was risky. Yet Jack felt something inside him that refused to leave her behind. He worked quietly, talking to her in soft tones. He repeated the same words and gestures over and over. Mara began to respond, mimicking his hand movements and sounds. Each small success was a victory. Jack examined the splints again. He adjusted the bindings carefully, making sure they did not cut into her skin. Mara winced at one spot. He paused, checking her reaction. He learned quickly which areas were most sensitive. His human medical training gave him the tools, but patience and observation guided him. He cleaned minor scrapes and applied a protective gel to prevent infection. Mara flinched at the cold touch but relaxed when she saw his calm face. She began to understand that he meant no harm. Over the next few hours, Jack tried to communicate more. He drew simple pictures in the dust with a stick. A circle meant stay, an arrow meant move, a line meant pain. Mara watched closely. She copied some shapes, pointing to her legs when she needed relief. Slowly, a basic language of gestures formed between them. It was not perfect, but it worked. It allowed Jack to understand when she was in pain, when she needed water, and when she needed rest. Mara tried to move her upper body. Her arms were strong, even though her legs were broken. Jack encouraged her, giving small exercises to keep her muscles from weakening. She followed his guidance, careful not to hurt herself further. She realized that this human, though small in number, had a knowledge and determination that could keep her alive. She felt a strange gratitude, unlike anything she had known with her own kind. The human team worked on communications to call for help from the main human base. Storms had damaged their systems, and it would take time. Jack knew that Mara's condition could worsen if rescue was delayed. He decided to prepare for an emergency move. Using metal scraps, fabric, and ropes, he created a rough stretcher. It was not perfect, but it would support her weight and allow him to carry her if needed. Mara watched silently, fascinated by the human ability to improvise. Jack paused and looked at the horizon. Distant mountains of jagged rock rose under the faint sunlight. He realized how isolated they were, yet he did not feel fear. He felt determination. He had seen too many humans give up in harsh conditions. He had always believed that someone should not be abandoned if help was possible. He glanced at Mara, and in her eyes he saw a quiet strength. She had survived the crash, endured the cold, and now depended on him. He would not fail her. The afternoon came with a thin mist drifting across the plains. Jack moved the stretcher closer, showing Mara how it would hold her. She touched it, feeling the rough materials. He demonstrated gently how she should stay still when lifted. She nodded slowly. The trust between them grew stronger. Jack spoke softly, reassuring her with tone and presence rather than words. She realized that even without understanding language, safety could be communicated. A small setback occurred when Mara shifted suddenly. Pain shot through her legs and she cried out. Jack reacted quickly, adjusting the splints and soothing her. He had learned to watch her reactions carefully. Each expression of pain was a signal to slow down. He kept speaking softly, telling her it would be okay. Mara's breathing calmed. She realized that patience was part of this human's help. He did not rush or scold. He simply responded, and that made her feel secure. As evening approached, Jack checked her supplies. He had limited water and food, but enough for now. He gave her more water, encouraging her to drink slowly. She began to trust his timing. She realized that humans planned carefully and worked steadily. They did not panic. Mara felt a quiet admiration. This human, though strange and different, had qualities that were valuable and strong. He had risked everything to find her and now worked tirelessly to keep her alive. Night came, colder than before. Jack set up a small portable light, shielding it from the wind. He sat close to Mara, keeping her warm with a thermal blanket. She rested against him lightly, a gesture of trust. Jack smiled faintly, exhausted but satisfied. He thought about the human desire to help others, even at risk. He had seen courage in many forms, but this was different. It was quiet, patient, and persistent. It was a choice to stay, even when danger was near. The wind howled outside the crater, carrying fine dust that stung exposed parts of his suit. Jack kept talking to Mara softly, telling stories of his home. He described simple things: green forests, blue skies, and small towns filled with people who cared for one another. Mara could not understand the words, but she felt the emotions. She imagined these places, strange and beautiful, and a feeling of comfort grew inside her. She realized that this human was sharing more than knowledge. He was sharing hope. Jack also listened to her. Though he could not understand her language fully, he noticed small patterns. Sounds, gestures, and expressions gave him clues. He learned when she was tired, when she was hungry, and when she was scared. Each observation helped him make better decisions. He realized that survival depended on understanding another being completely, not just treating injuries. He treated Mara as more than a patient. He treated her as a partner in survival. Over the next day, they continued small exercises to keep her strength. Jack moved her arms gently, encouraged her to use her hands, and helped her reach for water and food. Mara began to anticipate his movements, understanding the rhythm of his care. They developed routines: morning water, midday rest, evening light and warmth. Each routine was a small victory, a sign that life persisted despite the crash, the broken legs, and the isolation. Jack made small notes on a portable device, recording observations and measurements. He did not write words she could read, but he could track her progress. He noted how she responded to movements, what caused pain, and which techniques worked best. He used this information to adjust care constantly. Mara watched and learned. She began to recognize patterns, understanding that humans planned and adapted. This awareness gave her a sense of control, even in her vulnerable state. The human team continued their repairs, preparing to call for a larger rescue. Jack reassured Mara that help would come. He pointed to the horizon, then mimicked flying, showing that someone would arrive. Mara's eyes brightened slightly. She had almost lost hope after days alone. Now she felt that help was real, tangible, and close. The trust between them deepened. She could not speak his words, but she could feel the promise in his actions. Evening fell again. Jack prepared a small meal and shared it with Mara carefully. She ate slowly, encouraged by his calm presence. He kept her warm and checked the splints one last time before night. He sat close, holding her hand lightly, a gesture of reassurance. She did not fully understand it, but she felt its meaning. She began to relax, allowing herself to rest. The day had been long, but progress had been made. Survival was no longer only a struggle, it had become a partnership. As they rested, Jack thought about the lessons of this day. Patience, observation, and persistence were as important as medical skill. Survival depended on trust, even between different worlds. Mara had shown resilience and intelligence, and he had learned to respect her strength. Together, they had made small steps forward, moving from desperation to hope. The first part of their story had ended with survival. This second part showed that trust and partnership could develop even in the harshest conditions. Jack and Mara had faced pain, isolation, and fear. Yet each step forward brought life and connection. They rested together, knowing the future was uncertain, but believing that survival was possible when help, care, and trust were given freely. The moon was quiet, cold, and pale. Stars twinkled far above. Yet inside the small crater, life persisted. Jack and Mara had found each other, and in their connection, hope grew. The story of a human and an alien learning to survive together had begun, and the next steps would be even more challenging. But now, they were no longer alone. Days passed slowly on the gray moon. Jack and Mara had settled into a routine. Each morning, Jack checked her splints, adjusted the bindings, and gave her small exercises to keep her upper body strong. Mara followed his guidance carefully, learning to trust his hands and his quiet voice. They had not yet shared words they could understand, but their gestures, eyes, and small sounds had become a language of their own. Jack observed her closely. He noticed that Mara could twist her upper body, reach, and even roll slightly without causing more pain. He encouraged her to do these small movements, careful not to overdo it. Each time she moved safely, he praised her gently. Mara responded with a small nod or a faint smile. She had begun to understand that Jack's patience and care were constant, that he would not leave her in pain. The human team worked farther from the crater, repairing the rover and attempting to call for help. Communication delays and storms slowed them. Jack knew that they might have to wait longer than expected. He prepared mentally for the possibility that he might have to care for Mara alone for several more days. The thought did not frighten him. He had survived tough conditions before, and now he had someone depending on him. Mara began to communicate more actively. She pointed to her legs, showing exactly where the pain was strongest. She used her fingers to indicate pressure or discomfort. Jack learned quickly to read these signals. He cleaned her injuries gently, applied healing gels, and adjusted the splints. She flinched sometimes, but she stopped resisting. Slowly, she realized that each action made her safer, not more hurt. One morning, a small problem arose. The wind had shifted overnight, blowing dust under the blankets and into her injuries. Mara cried out sharply, pulling her legs away. Jack reacted immediately, shielding her and removing the debris carefully. He washed the scrapes gently with water he had filtered from the limited supplies. Mara shivered but remained still, trusting his touch. She began to understand that pain could be managed if one had someone to guide and protect them. As the day progressed, Jack prepared a small activity to keep her mind alert. He used scraps of metal, stones, and small sticks to draw shapes and patterns in the dust. He demonstrated, pointing to a circle, then a line, then another circle. Mara watched closely. After a few attempts, she copied the pattern. She laughed softly at her mistakes, a sound that made Jack smile. Though their language was different, shared moments like this created bonds stronger than words. Jack also began to teach her small routines for self-care. He showed her how to use her hands to scratch itches, adjust blankets, and take small sips of water on her own. Mara learned quickly. She realized that while her legs were broken, she could still act and make choices. Jack encouraged her independence where possible, knowing that this would help her recover mentally as well as physically. By the third day of this routine, Mara started attempting to speak simple sounds. She tried to repeat Jack's words, mimicking his tone and rhythm. Jack encouraged her, repeating the sounds and smiling. They could not understand each other fully, but a bridge was forming. Every small sound she made was a step toward connection. Jack felt hope. He realized that communication was not just about words, but about attention, trust, and patience. One afternoon, a new challenge appeared. The temperature dropped sharply, colder than anything they had experienced before. Jack quickly set up the portable heater and wrapped Mara in extra layers. She shivered, pressing closer to him for warmth. He held her gently, making sure she stayed comfortable while monitoring her breathing. The cold was dangerous, especially for her weak state. Jack had to act carefully and steadily. During this time, Mara learned more about humans. She watched how Jack planned, adjusted, and solved problems. He used small tools in clever ways, created improvised braces, and managed limited supplies carefully. She realized that humans could adapt to almost any situation. Though she came from a species known for technology and speed, she admired Jack's persistence and thoughtfulness. She began to see humans in a new light, as capable and reliable allies. Jack, on the other hand, learned more about Mara's reactions. Her body language, the way her eyes widened at pain, the way she tensed or relaxed, all gave him information he could use. He had to invent new ways to treat her injuries, mixing human medical knowledge with careful observation of alien physiology. He discovered that small changes, different angles, lighter pressure, or pauses between movements could make a big difference in her comfort. One evening, as the stars shone faintly in the sky, Jack and Mara shared a quiet moment. He pointed to the stars, then to the moon's surface, showing her the vastness around them. Mara tilted her head, trying to understand. She did not fully grasp the concept, but she felt awe. Jack smiled softly. He did not need her to understand words. He wanted her to feel wonder and hope. She rested her head lightly on his shoulder. The gesture was small, but it meant trust. The next morning, a minor accident occurred. Mara shifted unexpectedly, knocking the splint slightly. She cried out in sharp pain. Jack responded immediately, adjusting the braces and speaking softly. He had learned to remain calm even when accidents happened. Mara realized that mistakes were not punished, only corrected with care. She began to relax more, understanding that she could trust him completely. This trust became a cornerstone of their survival. Throughout the days, they continued simple exercises. Jack encouraged her to move her arms, twist her upper body, and reach for objects. Mara learned to coordinate her movements carefully. Jack praised every small success. She smiled more often, laughed at minor mistakes, and even initiated small gestures to communicate. The rhythm of their days became predictable and comforting. Survival was no longer only about pain and danger. It had become about learning, adapting, and trusting. Jack also worked on mental exercises. He pointed to shapes, drew lines in the dust, and created patterns for Mara to follow. She tried to copy them, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding. Each attempt strengthened her mind and gave her a sense of control. Jack realized that mental stimulation was as important as physical care. Mara's resilience grew not just because of her body, but because she felt capable and engaged. The human team made progress on their communication systems. They could send small messages to the base, asking for a larger rescue. Jack reassured Mara that help was on the way. He pointed to the horizon, mimicked flying hands, and showed her that someone would come soon. Mara's eyes brightened. She had almost lost hope, but now she felt that rescue was real and close. Trust deepened further, and hope returned stronger. One day, Jack noticed something remarkable. Mara tried to stand, using her upper body and the support of the makeshift braces. She could not fully rise, but the attempt showed courage and determination. Jack supported her carefully, guiding her movements. They worked slowly, step by step. She managed a small lift, then rested. Jack praised her quietly, and she smiled faintly. Each small effort was a victory, proof that recovery, though slow, was possible. Evenings were spent together quietly. Jack prepared meals, checked injuries, and kept her warm. Mara rested, sometimes leaning lightly against him. They shared the silence, the cold, and the strange comfort of presence. Words were still few, but meaning was clear. Trust, care, and partnership had grown stronger than anything language could convey. Survival depended not on technology alone, but on human patience and alien courage. As another night fell, Jack reflected on their progress. He realized that survival was not a solitary act. It required connection, attention, and understanding. He had learned to adapt human knowledge to alien needs. Mara had learned to trust, to endure, and to cooperate. Together, they had survived challenges that neither could have faced alone. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride, but relief that life could persist in the harshest conditions. Mara, too, felt a change. Fear and pain were still present, but hope had returned. She had begun to understand humans, not as strangers, but as beings capable of care, patience, and persistence. She had begun to participate actively in her survival. The bond between them had become strong enough to face future dangers. She was no longer completely alone. She had someone she could trust fully, someone who refused to leave her, someone who taught her that survival was possible even when the odds seemed impossible. The third part of their story ended with quiet progress. Each day, trust deepened. Each small action, gesture, or word brought them closer. Jack and Mara were no longer simply survivor and medic. They were partners, learning from each other, adapting together, and facing the challenges of the moon as a team. The future was still uncertain, but they faced it with courage, patience, and hope. The stars above continued to shine. The wind blew softly across the crater. The moon was silent and cold, but inside, life persisted. Jack and Mara had learned that survival depended on more than strength or technology. It depended on trust, understanding, and care. Their partnership had become a story of resilience, proving that even in the harshest worlds, connection and hope could endure. The moon's surface had grown colder and more dangerous as days passed. Jack and Mara had settled into routines, but the harsh conditions tested them constantly. Loose rocks, shifting dust, and sudden drops made every step a risk. Jack had become skilled at moving around her, keeping Mara safe while still allowing her to participate in her own survival. Each day was a careful balance of caution and progress. Mara had grown stronger in small ways. Her arms were firm from lifting, pushing, and supporting herself. She could now reach for water and supplies without constant help. Jack encouraged this, knowing that independence was part of recovery. She smiled faintly whenever she succeeded, her eyes bright with the smallest spark of pride. Jack smiled too, glad to see her confidence grow. Survival was no longer simply endurance, it had become teamwork. One morning, a new danger arrived. A thin layer of ice had formed on the rocks after a cold night. Jack had been walking near Mara to check the splints when his foot slipped slightly. He caught himself, but it reminded him that every movement was a risk. He motioned for Mara to stay still while he checked the area, pointing to the ice and using gestures to show caution. Mara nodded, understanding immediately. Even small gestures had become an effective language between them. Jack worked on strengthening her legs gently. He could not repair the bones fully, but he could prevent further damage and keep circulation active. Using improvised braces and careful positioning, he guided her through slow, small movements. Each time Mara winced, but she continued, encouraged by his calm presence. She was learning patience, learning that progress could be slow but still meaningful. The wind howled across the moon's crater, carrying fine dust that stung skin and irritated lungs. Jack covered Mara's face with a soft mask, making sure she could breathe comfortably. He moved debris from around her and adjusted the blanket to block the cold. She shivered but stayed still, trusting his careful hands. The harsh environment reminded Jack of how fragile life could be, and how small actions could make the difference between survival and disaster. As the day passed, Jack noticed a subtle change in Mara. She began to anticipate his movements. When he approached to adjust the splints or offer water, she held out her arms or leaned slightly forward. She had learned to communicate actively, not just react. Jack felt a quiet pride. He knew that survival depended on more than medical skill. It depended on cooperation, trust, and learning from one another. Mara was participating in her own survival. The human team continued their work, repairing communication devices and preparing for a larger rescue. Storms had delayed signals, and backup power was failing. Jack explained to Mara, using gestures and simple sounds, that help was coming but it would take time. She listened carefully, nodding and watching his expressions. The idea of help on the way strengthened her spirit. She began to imagine being lifted off the cold, gray surface and returning to safety. One afternoon, Mara attempted something new. She tried to shift her legs slightly to reduce stiffness. Pain shot through her and she cried out. Jack reacted immediately, supporting her with careful hands. He adjusted the braces and spoke softly, encouraging her to remain calm. She realized that mistakes or pain did not mean failure. Jack's patience and constant care reassured her. She felt a growing sense of security, knowing she was not alone in the struggle. Jack also began to teach her small strategies for survival. He showed her how to use rocks to block the wind, how to arrange blankets for warmth, and how to signal if she needed help. Mara learned quickly, following his guidance and even suggesting small adjustments herself. She was no longer just a patient, she was an active participant. Jack realized that survival worked best when both could adapt and contribute. Together, they formed a partnership stronger than the harsh moon around them. As evening approached, Jack prepared a small meal and offered it to Mara. She ate carefully, encouraged by his gentle attention. He monitored her breathing and pulse, making sure she stayed safe while eating. She began to anticipate his actions, understanding the rhythm of care. She felt a sense of security she had not known before. Even in the vast, cold emptiness of the moon, she was beginning to feel connected, safe, and valued. That night, a minor emergency occurred. A sudden gust of wind blew dust into her eyes and mouth. She coughed, frightened. Jack reacted immediately, shielding her, removing debris, and calming her with gentle words and gestures. He had learned to stay calm under pressure. Mara realized that even unexpected dangers could be managed with careful guidance. She relaxed in his presence, trusting that he would protect her no matter what. Over the next few days, Jack continued to teach her small skills. She learned to position herself for warmth, to adjust the blankets, and even to use her arms to roll slightly when necessary. These small victories strengthened her confidence. She began to smile more, laugh softly at minor mistakes, and initiate gestures to communicate. Their partnership grew stronger, built on trust, shared effort, and mutual respect. One afternoon, Jack noticed something remarkable. Mara tried to support herself with her arms and braces, attempting a partial lift. She could not stand fully, but the effort showed courage and determination. Jack guided her slowly, encouraging every small movement. She managed to lift slightly higher than before, then rested. Jack praised her quietly, and she smiled faintly. Each small success became a step toward full recovery, proof that progress, though slow, was possible. The human team finally made partial contact with the base. They sent signals indicating their location and requested a larger rescue team. Jack reassured Mara, using gestures and simple sounds, that help was coming. She listened carefully, her eyes brightening. Hope, almost lost after days of isolation and pain, returned stronger than before. She realized that survival depended not only on endurance but also on trust and partnership. Evenings were now spent quietly, but with purpose. Jack prepared meals, monitored injuries, and kept Mara warm. Mara rested, sometimes leaning lightly against him for comfort. Silence was no longer empty. It was filled with understanding, trust, and shared presence. Words were limited, but their meaning was clear. The bond between them had grown stronger than any language could convey. Survival depended on connection, attention, and care as much as skill. Jack reflected on their progress. Each day, trust had deepened. Each small action, gesture, or sound brought them closer. He had adapted human knowledge to alien physiology and learned new ways to observe and respond. Mara had learned to trust, to endure, and to participate actively in her recovery. Together, they faced challenges the moon threw at them and adapted with courage, patience, and determination. Mara, too, felt a change. Fear and pain were still present, but hope had returned fully. She had begun to see humans as beings capable of care, patience, and persistence. She had learned that survival required cooperation, trust, and courage. She no longer felt entirely alone. She had someone she could rely on, someone who refused to leave her, someone who taught her that life could continue even when the odds seemed impossible. As the fourth part of their story ended, the moon remained cold, gray, and silent. Outside the crater, storms and dust roared, but inside, life persisted. Jack and Mara had learned that survival was more than physical strength or advanced technology. It depended on patience, trust, observation, and care. Together, they had overcome pain, fear, and isolation. Their partnership was strong enough to face whatever challenges the next stage would bring. The stars above twinkled faintly. The wind carried fine dust across the lunar surface. Yet in the small crater, life and hope thrived. Jack and Mara had proven that survival could be achieved even in the harshest conditions when connection, care, and courage guided every action. They were no longer simply medic and patient. They were partners, learning, adapting, and enduring together. The rescue was coming, but no matter what happened, their bond had already changed both of them. The days on the moon had grown long and tiring for both Jack and Mara. The cold and dust had not stopped, but their bond had grown stronger with each passing day. Jack had become skilled at caring for her, learning to read every movement, every flinch, every small signal of pain. Mara had learned to trust him completely, following his guidance even without words. Survival had become a shared effort, and the rhythm of their days had formed a quiet partnership. Early one morning, the distant hum of engines broke the silence. Mara raised her head slightly, her eyes wide. Jack had seen the signal on his scanner earlier, and now he knew help had finally arrived. A larger human team descended onto the lunar surface, moving carefully across the gray rocks. They had brought proper medical equipment, stronger lights, and vehicles designed to transport injured beings. Mara could not understand the details, but she felt relief and hope for the first time in many days. Jack signaled to the new team, using gestures and simple sounds to explain Mara's condition. The humans approached slowly, respectful of the alien body and the fragile state she was in. Mara watched closely, observing how the humans moved differently from Jack, but carefully. She understood immediately that Jack's patient guidance had prepared her for this moment. She felt a small surge of gratitude for the human who had refused to leave her alone. The team began to assess Mara. Jack explained with gestures and short words how her legs had been stabilized, where pain was greatest, and which movements required caution. The new medics nodded, impressed by his skill and careful observation. They had advanced equipment, but it was Jack's patience, knowledge, and careful monitoring that had kept her alive until now. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride, but relief that her survival was no longer solely in his hands. As the humans prepared a stretcher suitable for her, Mara looked at Jack. She reached out her hand, touching his arm lightly. Jack understood the gesture instantly. It was a wordless thank you, a recognition of the bond they had shared through pain, fear, and hope. He smiled softly, squeezing her hand gently. She smiled faintly back. The communication was simple, but it carried everything: trust, gratitude, and connection. Jack guided her carefully onto the new stretcher, supporting her with his hands. The other medics assisted, lifting her gently while keeping her braces intact. Mara's breathing was steady, but she was still fragile. Jack stayed close, ensuring that every movement caused minimal pain. He spoke softly, comforting her with tone and presence. She understood. She was no longer alone. She was in capable hands and rescue was real. Once safely on the transport vehicle, the team began to move across the moon's rough surface. Jack remained by her side, monitoring her condition and adjusting the blankets. Mara rested quietly, her body relaxed but alert. She could feel the vibrations beneath her, the hum of engines, and the steady presence of the humans around her. She realized that survival was no longer only about endurance. It was also about trust, care, and cooperation. She had learned to accept help, and that acceptance was a strength, not weakness. Jack observed her closely. He noted how her breathing changed with each bump and jolt. He adjusted padding, checked braces, and reassured her with soft words and gestures. The new medics followed his lead, learning from his methods. Jack felt a quiet pride in their progress. He knew that his choices over the past days, staying, observing, guiding, had given Mara the chance to survive. She had endured the crash, isolation, and harsh conditions, but his care had been the bridge to life. As they approached the landing zone for the main human base, Mara's eyes widened at the sight of larger structures, lights, and humans moving with purpose. She had never seen anything like this before. The human world was larger and stranger than she had imagined, but she felt no fear. She felt hope. She felt that Jack's care had prepared her for this transition. She could trust humans now, even beyond him, because he had shown her what humanity could be: patient, careful, and compassionate. Upon arrival at the base, medical personnel prepared a proper examination room. Mara was carefully transferred from the stretcher to a soft, padded table. Jack stayed nearby, monitoring her vital signs and ensuring she remained calm. The advanced equipment would now take over, but the team respected the work Jack had done to stabilize her. They asked questions, noting every detail about her injuries and the techniques he had used. Jack answered simply, clearly, and calmly. He had learned that observation, patience, and gentle care were sometimes more important than technology. As the examination continued, Mara watched Jack. She could feel the connection between them still present, even in the busy room filled with humans. She understood that he had risked his life and comfort to keep her alive. She wanted to communicate this, but words were still difficult. Instead, she pressed her hand lightly on his arm, her eyes meeting his. Jack smiled softly, understanding everything she could not yet say. They had formed a bond that crossed language, species, and worlds. After the examination, doctors confirmed that Mara would recover, though slowly. Her legs were broken but stable, and with proper care, she would regain mobility. Jack felt a quiet relief. He had feared that the long wait, cold, and isolation might have caused complications. Now he knew that survival was certain. Mara, too, felt relief. She had endured so much, yet life had returned to her. She felt gratitude and hope, stronger than ever before. Over the next few days, Jack continued to assist with her recovery. He helped her adjust to proper medical equipment, taught her to move carefully, and reassured her during treatments. Mara responded with patience and determination. She followed instructions, learned new techniques for care, and even tried to walk with assistance. Each small success was celebrated with smiles, gentle touches, and quiet encouragement. Their partnership remained strong, even as human technology now supported her healing. Mara's people arrived to retrieve her. They were astonished to see a human medic responsible for her survival. They had advanced technology capable of treating injuries far faster than Jack's methods. Yet it was his patience, observation, and willingness to stay that had kept her alive until they arrived. Mara's people expressed gratitude, though she understood only in part. She had already shown them through actions. She was alive because of a human who refused to leave her. Jack prepared to leave the base and return to his duties. Mara reached out, holding his hand for a moment. She could not yet form words, but the gesture carried meaning. It was a goodbye, a thank you, and a promise to remember. Jack squeezed her hand gently, smiling. He had not sought recognition or reward. His work was done, and seeing her alive and hopeful was enough. He had learned that humanity was defined not by strength or technology alone, but by care, patience, and persistence. As Mara left with her people, she looked back at Jack one last time. She felt a mixture of gratitude, respect, and affection. He had shown her the meaning of trust, survival, and hope across worlds. She would carry this memory with her, sharing the story with her people, changing how they viewed humans. Jack watched her leave, knowing that their bond had left an impact on both of them. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that life, compassion, and endurance had won. The moon's surface returned to quiet after the departure. Jack walked back to his own team, reflecting on the days spent caring for Mara. He had faced cold, isolation, pain, and uncertainty. Yet he had never wavered. He had learned patience beyond what any training could teach, and he had discovered that life could be preserved through simple acts of attention, care, and determination. The lessons he carried were more valuable than any medal or reward. Mara's story spread among her people. They marveled that a human had saved one of their own when advanced technology alone could not. She described him in gestures and sounds, praising his patience and courage. Jack's actions had built a bridge between two species, showing that connection and trust could survive even the most extreme conditions. She had learned that life could be protected not only by power, but by understanding, persistence, and care. As the days passed, both Jack and Mara carried the memory of their time together. Jack continued his work as a medic, but he remembered the lessons he had learned about patience, observation, and partnership. Mara returned to her people, stronger, wiser, and alive because of human compassion. Both knew that survival depended on connection as much as skill, and that even across worlds, hope could be nurtured by small, careful actions. The story ended not with conflict or struggle but with life, trust, and hope. Jack and Mara had faced impossible odds, a crash, broken bodies, isolation, and harsh conditions, yet they had survived. They had learned from one another, adapted together, and forged a bond that would endure in memory. The human desire to help, to stay, and to care had crossed the boundaries of species, leaving a lasting impact on both their worlds. The stars above the moon twinkled quietly, indifferent to the struggles below. The wind whispered across the gray surface. Yet in the crater where they had survived, life and hope persisted. Mara lived because a human refused to give up. Jack acted because he believed no one should be left behind. Together, they had shown that true strength lay not in force or technology, but in patience, compassion, and unwavering care. And so the alien woman healed, the human medic returned to his duty, and the story of survival, trust, and connection passed quietly into history, a story of humanity at its best, crossing worlds and saving a life.